I found that we're taught many things when we first start to learn piano that we just assume we need to carry forward with us as we become more and more advanced. And one of these is the notion of legato fingering. Sure, there are many times when it's absolutely required to maintain legato in the fingers, but there are also many situations where it's completely irrelevant and, if anything, is likely to be slowing us down. Let me explain what I mean. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. Hi, this is Tommy with Tommy's Piano Corner, the place for returning pianists, or indeed anyone who loves piano, to share tips and ideas of how to get the best from this great hobby. If it is your first trip here, then please do think about subscribing. Simply hit the little icon in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen now, and it's all done for you. I've seen people told countless times that they must always work on maintaining legato in the fingers and only ever rely on the pedal to do this when the fingers just can't reach. And yeah, sure, for simple music, I think this is fine. But as we progress, there are reasons that we need to challenge this viewpoint because the pedal does much more than just give us legato. I'm always a little nervous, if you like, of releasing videos like this that challenge one of the very commonly held things that we're always told. But it's one of these things that I think falls under the category of lies to pianists and something that we should feel free to challenge as we move forward. If you do believe that you need to maintain legato always in your fingers, then I'm not going to say that you're wrong. Of course I'm not. There's more than one way to play piano, as we all know. But do watch to the end, because I'm sure you'll find some things that maybe you hadn't thought about before, and it'll give you some new ideas. And in my defense, I'd just like to add that I'm not the only person saying this. I've seen very respected members of the piano teaching community post things where they're putting their head above the parapet, so to speak, and saying that, you don't necessarily need to stubbornly stick to the idea of legato fingering all the time. So of course, by legato, what we mean is that slight overlap, don't we, between the notes, so that there's not a space, if you like, a silence between two notes, and each note overlaps ever so slightly. And of course, to achieve this on the piano, we've got the piano's mechanism that helps us, haven't we? As we press down a key, there are a couple of things that the action does for us. First thing, of course, is it sends a hammer catapulting towards a string, so it's going to strike it and make some noise. But then to make sure that we're able to hear that when it sounds, there's also a damper that is lifted from the string so that just before the hammer strikes it, the damper's lifted off and the note can sound. And of course, as long as we keep our finger depressed, that damper remains lifted from the string. I mean, the hammer itself is not having any more effect on the sound that we made, but the fact that the damper has not been lowered means that the note still sounds. So therefore, if we want to maintain legato on a piano in our fingers, all we need to do is make sure that we lift the finger we've just played ever so slightly after we play the next finger. And that gives us this slight overlap in the sound. And then, of course, to stop the previous note from sounding, as we lift the finger, the damper will fall back onto the string, and that will silence any sound that was left. Now let's think about the right pedal, sometimes called the damper pedal, and in fact, when I was young, a lot of people called it the loud pedal. Now, when I was first taught, and I'm sure many people are taught the same, I was told that the pedal is there to help us maintain a legato sound, even when our fingers can no longer reach. And of course, as we know, this is simply because as we press the pedal down, all of the dampers are lifted off all of the strings, and therefore when we play a note, we don't need to hold that key down to keep its damper lifted from its strings. And that's how we maintain this legato sound, by using the pedal. So coming back to my expression lies to pianists, I actually borrowed this from Terry Pratchett in one of his books where he called Lies to Children. And basically, Lies to Children is something where if there's something that's a little bit complicated to explain, we come up with a very simple truth when we first explain it. That might not be strictly speaking very true, but it gives us just what we need so we can start to understand. And if we think about the complex purposes of what the right pedal actually does on piano, if we try to explain all of these things all at once to a beginner, then it would just be information overload. So we make the nice simple truth that we use it to maintain legato, and we demonstrate that, and all's good in the world. However, as we progress, we really need to start thinking about the more complex truth. And this is that once we bring the pedal into the equation, then holding down or releasing the keys doesn't make any difference to the sound that we make. And really, it's just the way we strike the key in these circumstances that influences the sound that we're going to get. Now, to my mind, the complex truth, the real complex truth, is that in actual fact, the idea of connecting two notes in a legato way is almost a side effect of the pedal. And the pedal's real effect is that it adds resonance to the piano. This addition of resonance is why the pedal is often referred to as being the soul of the piano, because it changes the sound and the quality of the sound beyond all recognition once you start to use it. Now, I talked about this in more detail in my video Pedal Like a Pro, which I'll link below for you, but summarising very briefly, the reason the pedal adds so much difference in sound is that when we strike a note, once all of the dampers have been lifted from all of the strings, every string will resonate, will vibrate, if you like, in sympathy with the note that we've sounded, and therefore the sound we get is completely different. Take a listen. And this is why I think it's so important that we remember this when we're using pedal, because if we just use the odd dab of pedal to maintain legato where our fingers can't, to my mind it sounds really bizarre, because in actual fact we're changing the quality of the sound. We're not just joining two notes together. And that's why if we're going to use pedal at all for legato purposes, then we also should really think about using it elsewhere, if in small dabs, so that we get a uniform sound in a piece. However, all of this said, there are of course some quite good reasons why we might want to keep this legato connection in our fingers whenever this is practical. And that's what, of course, makes piano tricky, isn't it? Because there's no simple hard and fast rule. It's all about working out what works best and when. So what I've found is that quite often, if you've got this tactile connection between two notes, it's much easier to judge the force that you need to use as you join the sound together, not necessarily just the legato part, but the tone of the notes. And try for yourself, if you try and play a melody with just one finger, even with the pedal down, it's much more difficult to make it sound nice and phrased than if you play it with this traditional legato fingering, as it were. However, quite often as music becomes more complex, tying ourselves in knots, trying to just maintain this connection when we already know that it's not changing the sound in any way whatsoever, is probably counterproductive. And I'll link a video below called Legato Cat by John Mortensen, which is quite an interesting thing to watch. I think as we progress, the most important thing is that we learn to make this connection in tone without necessarily having a connection in our fingers. And that's more tricky to do, but is absolutely necessary as the music gets more complex. As an aside, you might have noticed that if you play any note from the sort of last but one F at the top of the piano, then there are actually no dampers there at all. So whether you play that key and then hold it down or not, even without the pedal, does not change the sound one little bit. Therefore, I think we should think more in terms of the piano's resonance and using the pedal for that main purpose, rather than tying ourselves in knots, trying to hold keys down awkwardly with strange stretches, when in any event, they're not changing the sound that we're making because the pedal's pressed. Start giving this a try for yourself and you'll probably be surprised that it can make certain pieces remarkably easier to play and not change the quality of the playing that you get at the end of it. If you're not already, then please do subscribe to Tommy's Piano Corner. Don't forget to hit that little bell icon so you're notified of new videos as and when they're released. I do thank you very much for watching and look forward to seeing you very soon.